Welcome to the Noble Ape Podcast, Ape Reality. I'm Tom Barbalet, and today also the June 2007 Mailout. Now, a little bit of background to this. You may not imagine this to be the case, but I do occasionally get tongue-tied, and I tried to record this podcast yesterday evening. 7 takes. Not one of them worked. I didn't even get past the first point. It occurred to me first thing this morning, it was probably because the first point featured the wrong release version of the simulation in my notes. In any case, version 0.685 was released at the start of this month, and this actually is a bit of a renaissance with regards to Noble Ape development, because I put down the best damn podcast ever, put down my editing role with that, and have decided to reinvest my energy into Noble Ape, Ape Reality, the book project, and Biota.org. And I started off recording 3 Biota.org podcasts in a 2-week period to reinvigorate the podcast feed, because it had been even more neglected than Ape Reality. Interesting footnote to this, I think everyone who listens to Ape Reality also listens to the Biota.org podcast, if only the other way around was true as well. So you all have heard the 3 podcasts by the sounds of things that came out. Interesting chat with David Van Nuys. Not really a lot to report aside from the fact that I got him a copy of the original manual, and I think we'll keep in contact. Interesting discussion with regards to what is unknown in psychology and how that may map into the cognitive simulation in Noble Ape. But David Van Nuys now has a copy of the original manual, and we'll hopefully keep in touch. A chat with Bruce Damer also made it into the Biota feed. Not a lot of Noble Ape related stuff associated with that chat, bar the fact that some information Bruce had given me prior to recording that particular podcast I passed on to my friend at MTV, which maintains that contact alive. He wears his Noble Ape t-shirt quite a bit, he tells me, which is a wonderful thing, and maybe one day it'll appear in a photograph or on camera and be memorialised in MTV as well. The book project has been, I wouldn't want to say neglected, but I just think the interaction with agents up until now hasn't been particularly positive. So I've been coming back in spades with the book project with the view that if through popular agents it doesn't come to fruition, or if the popular agents don't seem to understand or see that artificial life may have a popular audience, I will move it to academic publishers. There are a number of steps in this process, and I don't know, I mean, I've only really tested 3 agents so far, and I'm not particularly fussed currently. There appear to be probably close to 50 agents in the US that could easily pick up a book like the one I have written, and it's just a matter of going through those folk. Once I've gone through those folk, it'll be academic publishing. So there's a kind of logical sequence, but I do get the sense per the interview with David Van Nuys that the messages of artificial life just aren't getting out there. And really the only way we can do it is by, on one sense, doing things like book projects, another sense contacting local media, and another sense just putting our time into our projects. And I use the collective terminology because I know a number of artificial life developers listen to this podcast, and I'm very appreciative to receive your emails. The 3rd Biota.org podcast that came out related to the Artificial Life Contest, and that acknowledged to me that the need for a Spanish language version of Noble Ape is very great. Now, as all these projects, it's never just an easy set of changes. The Spanish Noble Ape project has got me focusing on the manual that's distributed with the simulation, and moving it into a format where it would easily be multilingual. I did a Spanish, Portuguese, and German version of Noble Ape Philosophic initially to test the proof of concept, and the feedback that I received from Pedro prior to Pedro actually listening to the A-Life Contest podcast in the Biota feed was that he thought Spanish would be the only language that was necessary other than English, and once he heard the Artificial Life Contest interview in the Biota feed, he then fully understood why it was necessary. So I think there's just a real need currently in Latin America to have contemporary artificial life projects so accessible to them in Spanish language, and I'm more than happy to do that with Noble Ape. I think it's been a long time coming in some regards, but it appears to be very necessary currently. I'm now going to spend a little bit of time talking about version 686, or 0.686, which I'm working on currently. And that's kind of stopped a little bit because I'm working on the Spanish language version of the manual, but it's kind of medium-term project which may be put into the 686 release or maybe spread out up to 688. I'm thinking along those lines currently. The first aspect is pulling out the graphics and replacing the graphics with an OpenGL, or really just the option for OpenGL, and that's almost there. I've pulled the graphics to the point where they're now just in a single file, which has changed the Noble toolkit a bit, moved all the scripting stuff into the Noble toolkit, and just been a reorganisation of functions in some regard, and also a removal of a lot of functions as well, particularly drawing-related functions that are almost obsolete and can be removed just for a slight slowdown in the general draw case as opposed to the OpenGL case. In addition, I'm working on the event atomization, and this is something that I've talked about with regards to event handling in a previous podcast, but it is going to be a medium project. My initial idea was to implement the OpenGL graphics first, or at least get that pretty well moving along before I started the event atomization. However, the two could go hand in hand. I'm still working on the logistics associated with both those things. But what it will mean in the short term is that I should probably do a cycled set of releases just to put the code out there progressively. So I think in this very podcast I have answered my question with regards to how the release cycles are going to work. So what it'll mean in the short term is that there should be a 686 release sometime in the next few weeks once the Spanish version of the manuals is available. I think that would actually be a feature in and of itself and certainly worthy of a release just to have the Spanish version of the manuals out. But there will also be some code changes initially which will go into the 686 release as well. And then a rollout 687, 688 as I progressively implement OpenGL and the event atomization as well. So this has been a relatively short mail out. I would like to receive email, and I'm always interested by the folk that emailed me frequently from this podcast, but also that there are a number of listeners who have never made contact whatsoever. It's kind of strange recording these podcasts because I do get a sense that a lot of people like them. I do get a sense that people are receptive to the format. I've gotten a lot of good feedback about keeping the podcast relatively short, both with regards to downloads and also with regards to just kind of inserting it in people's listening schedules. So, yeah, I'm always receptive to correspondence, particularly with regards to new topics. I've listened to a few of the podcasts recently, and also in reflection to some of the historical podcasts, and I think it's probably beneficial for me to reintroduce what the long-term project of Noble Ape is and do some of the original Foundation podcasts again in some format. So I'm still thinking on that, and if anyone has any feedback with regards to that, please email me, tom@nobleape.com. Love receiving email. Thank you very much for tuning into this podcast. Look forward to you tuning into the next podcast.